Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Great Exhibition Road Festival's new online series of events where we are bringing the best of art and science from across South Kensington into your homes. My name's Roland Ross, and I'm a member of alumni from the Visual Communication Pathway at the Royal College of Art, which is one of the festival partners. Today I'm joined by my co-collaborators, Professor Sara Rankin from Imperial College London, and Qona Rankin, who is Dyslexic Coordinator at the Royal College of Art. We've got a great discussion lined up for you to celebrate Neurodiversity Celebration Week. We're going to be discussing neurodiversity in the arts and the sciences, exploring the unique experiences of neurodiverse artists, designers, and musicians and researchers. We're going to kick off with a 20-minute presentation, and after that we'll be answering your live questions. So I would like to remind everyone that today is an interactive discussion and that we'd love to hear your thoughts, comments, and questions throughout. Just write to us in the YouTube chat function and your comments will be passed on for us to answer. Please be considerate when posting in the chat. We will be removing anything that disrupts the experience for others. Over to you, Qona, to kick off with our presentation.
Thank you very much, Roland, for your introductions. I'm going to start by explaining why I think being dyslexic and dyspraxic can give you a creative advantage. And I'll back that up with a bit of neuroscience. And then we'll celebrate some brilliant examples of themes produced by some of our exceptionally creative dyslexic and dyspraxic alumni. So up until about 10 years ago, dyslexia was mostly looked at as a deficit or a disadvantage. But then in 2011, Brock and Furnett-Eade wrote a best-selling book called The Dyslexic Advantage, which introduced a much more positive way of thinking about dyslexia and showed the advantages of being dyslexic, such as being creative and thinking creatively. More recently, in 2015, Rod Nicholson's Positive Dyslexia promoted the creative abilities of many dyslexic people, such as being a holistic thinker, thinking outside of the box, being really good at improvising with words and music, having good 3D visual spatial skills, being empathetic, intuitive, and tenacious, and having multiple perceptual views and making people laugh, sometimes unintentionally. Margaret Rook's Dyslexia is My Superpower brought together over 100 children and teenagers who talked about their dyslexic strengths. Her book, Creative Successful Dyslexic and Adult Dyslexia, Unleashing Your Limitless Power, both testify that there is absolutely no doubt that it's possible to have a successful career as a dyslexic adult. And the Bigger Picture book of Amazing Dyslexics and the Jobs They Do by Kate Power and Kathy Forsyth has many examples of some really famous dyslexics, including artists, designers, scientists, and architects. And in this book, you can read about the unique dyslexic way of thinking and how people have coped with the processing differences that many dyslexic people have, and how their dyslexia and unique thinking has enabled them to get to be at the top of their professions. So I hope I've convinced you, in case you needed convincing, that dyslexic brains and dyspraxic brains have the potential to be exceptionally creative because of the way they process information. In fact, dyslexic and dyspraxic creative strengths are now being acknowledged by a wide community. Diversity of thought in the media and technology fields is becoming increasingly valued. And interestingly, some architectural and design businesses look specifically to recruit people with dyslexia. Microsoft and Goldman Sachs have recently started initiatives specifically aimed at recruiting neurodiverse individuals by altering the interview process so that it's much more inclusive. So why is the neurodiverse community being sought after in the creative sector? Are we just better at it? And if so, why might that be? Neuroscientists have compared what happens in a task such as reading between a neurotypical and a dyslexic brain. The resulting fMRI scans reveal that reading is slower in the dyslexic brain because the messages don't take the most direct route to the part of the brain they need to get to. This means that instead of reading 240 words a minute, The dyslexic brain may read 150 words a minute, but at the same time, it could be making all sorts of fascinating connections and links through dipping into other processing centers in the brain. Now, I know everybody here already knows a lot about dyslexia and dyspraxia, but back in the summer, I wanted to show some of my colleagues in our history department why research tasks might be particularly hard for some of our dyslexic students. So I made a little film about two brains, one neurotypical, one neurodiverse. Could we have the next slide, please, Holly? Next slide. Okay, so the slide you should be seeing is a slide of two brains. One's neurotypical and the other is diverse. And they set off on bikes to meet a friend at the Black Lion, which is a local pub. Can we get the video up? Okay, so
So maybe, Qona, tell us the essence of the video, because it looks like we've got a bit of a technical.
Okay. So anyway, so the two brains set off on bikes, and they're doing this route to the pub. But brain A gets distracted by a fork in the road and sees a river, and then sees a police boat and thinks, what drama is going on here? Is somebody drowning? Oh my God, look at the texture on that tree. It's absolutely beautiful. Maybe I could use that as an idea for a piece of jewelry. Meanwhile, the neurotypical brain is halfway to the pub. The neurodiverse brain then sees a pattern on the tree that looks like a bit like a face. And then another barge goes past. There's a man on the front of the barge, and the neurodiverse brain wonders what on earth the man's thinking about. Then the neurodiverse brain sees a family taking a selfie on a bandstand, which is quite weird, this whole habit of taking selfies in strange places. Wonders what they're thinking about. Then sees a brilliant little building by the bandstand, which could be a wonderful location for a film. Anyway, by that stage, the neurotypical brain is happily sipping a beer at the pub with their friend. The neurodiverse brain realizes they're lost, but sees a stranger and stops to ask the way. It turns out the stranger has a film production company and they swap contact details. Now, this maybe sounds far-fetched, but it's possible that the neurodiverse brain, which may be perceived as unreliable because of their poor timekeeping, has actually not only won the day in terms of a potential job, but has also added to their wealth of visual experience for future reference. I'm sure you'd all agree that defocused attention, an abundance of unplanned irrational associations, and apparent loss of volitional control are all features that can be associated with creative activities. So this is a celebratory event. So to help us do that, I hope I'm going to show you some wonderful slides of things created by our dyslexic and dyspraxic RCA community. If not, I'm going to have to describe them to you.
Hi, I'm going to jump in. So I'm going to just see if I can show my slides, because I've got them up on my computer and I know you've been talking, so you haven't got yours. Let's see if it works. Oh my God. Share screen, let's see.
Something's happened. Oh, there's a mice.
Oh, you've got your slides, okay.
In that case, can I go on to the slide of Jo Hayes Ward, which is the Riverside? Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much. So Jo Hayes Ward was actually a graduate from our Jewellery and Metalworks School. And you can see she's increased her scale a bit here for her first piece of public art from Hammersmith's newly rebuilt Riverside Studios. But I think you can still imagine this as a brooch, and I love the many elements and textures within it, which to me reflect the sprawl of the city, the ebb and flow of the river, the diverse cultures of the people, and the coming together of ideas and creativity at Riverside Studios. The chair, please, tipped-on chair slide, which was designed by Edward Barber and Jay Oscarby while they were students at the RCA, and it was inspired by Edward, who found sitting still on a chair at school very difficult on account of his dyspraxia. The name of the chair is a bit of a giveaway, Tipton. The chair not so much tips as rocks, and I love the fact that they're used every day by our students in a couple of our canteens at the RCA. And now we've got a lovely piece of ceramics by Enrique, Touch Me Not and Praise. Enrique Red, who was in our ceramics department, and on his website he states, "I make art to share my visions and obsessions with others. Art is a sensorial experience that can't very often be explained plainly, because what arouses us will never stop being a mystery. I do not think art can change the world, but it can change how we see and understand it." And we've now got a wonderful Jeep done by Adrian Clark, who was automotive design student. And what he says about this is, Andy Warhol said the great thing about American capitalism was that the richest consumers buy the same brands as the poorest. The very best of American brands transcend class, wealth, politics, and geography. With this in mind, is it possible for the iconic manufacturer Jeep to utilize vehicle sharing and self-driving technology to provide a platform that could bring together this divided nation? Maybe that's a question for later. Next slide, please. Josh Sanders, winner of the Royal Television Society Student Awards in 2017. The judges commented, "Occasionally, animation can deliver an idea or feeling or emotion in a way that no other medium can. This film is a prime example of this, exploring mental illness with a fluidity of thought and imagery that only animation can achieve." Josh told me that understanding what it feels like to live with a dyslexic brain requires a leap of intelligence, and visual metaphors can be very powerful. It can feel like kicking an elephant through a cat flap. I love that. He also told me about the incredible frustration he felt of brimming with ideas with no clear way to get them out, until he discovered communicating visually. And finally, next slide, please, Matthew Briggs, one of our textile design students who met Beryl and June in an old greasy spoon on Broadstairs Beach. Matthew became fascinated with their heritage and defiance in maintaining a tradition that these London girls had grown up around. This collection of knitted fabrics forms a lineup of tag team wrestling matches pitting the Pearlies of different boroughs that have a tongue-in-cheek rivalry against each other for the Pearly Wrestling Federation Championship belt. I love the way Matthew's work has used this satirical look at tradition to utilize knitting possibilities to create graphic logos and motifs inspired by the symbols of Pearly life. And my last slide, which is my caterpillar and grasshopper. And I just wanted to end by saying, I'm so glad, sorry, not grasshopper, inchworm, that I have a brain that thinks in the way a grasshopper moves, rather than the logical, predictable way that an inchworm travels. The ability to think more like a grasshopper than an inchworm, I would argue, gives an edge to creativity and enables original and unpredictable solutions to problems to emerge. I think things in our world that are created by dyslexic and dyspraxic minds are definitely worth celebrating. What a pity that quirky, creative minds are still not acknowledged or rated in our schools, but that's another story. Today we're celebrating. And so I'm going to hand the virtual balloon and bunting on to Roland.
Thank you, Qona. So initially I was going to talk about Oscar Hanson's theory of open form, and try and relate it back to the act of designing spaces collaboratively as a group of neurodiverse individuals who rarely have agency over the design of the spaces that we inhabit. But at the last moment, I felt it was a bit strange to talk about physical spaces when we've spent the last year exploring the possibilities for us in virtual ones. So what I'm going to do instead is go through the program of events and workshops that we've been running during lockdown as a collective of neurodiverse designers, artists, scientists, and musicians and cultural workers who are trying to create change at our institutions. At the end, I'm going to try and summarize things a little to help us prepare for re-entry into these physical and blended spaces by using some of these things that we've picked up on the way. This is a next slide, sorry. So this is our network launch, which happened in, was it May last year? Or,
yeah.
Which kicked things off for us. Next slide, please. This is an event that we hosted by Amanda Kirby. Amanda's interactive workshop helped us to understand how neurodiverse individuals have been impacted during lockdown and provided us all with some tools to help us manage our well-being. Next slide, please. So this is with Heart Club, which is a neurodiverse workshop in Borough that was set up by the brilliant Helen Raleigh to champion neurodiversity in the arts. This was a roundtable discussion that talked about how we could adapt our environments for art production and display to make them more inclusive for different people, that supports a variety of different abilities in every level of its design and operation. Next slide, please. This is an example of the talk that we gave with David, which he didn't want to participate in the live discussion because I think he thought that would make him feel uncomfortable, but we really wanted him to be able to engage with the stuff that we were talking about. So we got him to pre-record his answers to various questions that we were answering. Next slide, please. Improvisation through drawing, which was a brilliant workshop set up by Qona. This session explored ways of drawing from improvisation through a series of exercises that revealed hidden meanings in our work and our thought processes. Next slide. This is another workshop that was set up by Qona and Howard Riley, who just published a book called Observational Drawing for Students with Dyslexia. Through this workshop, Howard and Qona guided us through a series of exercises that were designed to help neurodiverse people with observational drawing difficulties to improve their drawing skills. There's a little setup that Qona created. And then the next slide, please. And this was our last event, which was hosted by Sara, and it was called How to Translate Your Thoughts into Text, where we tackled the problem that a lot of us face when trying to formalize our ideas and research into linear text. And then next slide. This is a video that I think you should all watch by an artist called Artur Smiejewski, who's a Polish artist who was a graduate from the Academy of Fine Arts in Warsaw, who studied under a professor called Gregor Kowalski, who championed this theory of open form as a way of creating artworks collaboratively. Go and watch it, it's brilliant, you'll be blown away. This is a collaborative drawing exercise that me and Qona used as the start point for a series of workshops that we ran at the RCA last week in designing neurodiverse spaces for creativity. And this is the whiteboard function on the Zoom chat. Next one. And this is Gravity Sketch. Google that. It's amazing. You can collaborate with people on the other side of the planet in designing things. And this is a website that I've set up with Max Kohler, who's tuning in right now, I think. Hi, Max. Where we're collecting an archive of office spaces. Go and check it out. Okay, over to you, Sarah.
Okay, so now for something sort of slightly different, we're moving on to science. And so when you look at this, you'd think, wow, amazing number of neurodiverse scientists, and incredible, not only, you know, in terms of numbers, but in terms of achievement. You know, we've got the Wright brothers here, we've got Alan Turing, we've got Cavendish, and obviously all these people that we know have done amazing things. And when we move on to actually look at what they have invented, obviously we know Steve Jobs and the Mac and everything, and aeroplanes, telephones, I was trying to think, black holes, I guess. And really important for where we are in this time. You know, Louis Pasteur, who was dyslexic, invented, obviously, the vaccination process and the idea of mass vaccination. I mean, how important it is. Where would we be in the world without these phenomenal inventions? And one of the things I think links in with what Qona was saying is the grasshopper thing. It's not that people wouldn't have got there, it's just the time they would have taken. These people were way ahead of the time, and often quite the things that they were saying were things that people were, you know, really sort of disbelieving of for quite a while. And so quite often they didn't get maybe all the recognition during their lifetime. And I think a few people have mentioned, well, you know, we're focusing here on dyslexic, dyspraxic, but no, dyslexia is obviously the commonest type of neurodiversity. But I think when we come to the sciences, you know, we're really thinking about autistic people as well, because, you know, Cavendish, probably the most famous, invented the disciplines of physics and chemistry. And he was obviously autistic. Alan Turing voted the, you know, greatest mind or whatever of the 20th century, you know, the computing and everything that he did at Bletchley Park. So, you know, we have phenomenal scientists that we know about. The issue is, for me, that I can't put up a load of scientists from that I know, my colleagues that are dyslexic, dyspraxic, have ADHD or autistic. And that's because many scientists do not disclose their neurodiversity. And that's a complete contrast with the arts. So where are we? So in the fourth revolution, I'm told actually we're moving into the fifth revolution, if for those of you that don't know, you know, these revolutions are getting quicker. So the fourth revolution is about artificial intelligence. That's replacing straight line thinking. It's computers. And why is this important? Well, for businesses, and particularly for STEM businesses, if we go to the next slide, these are people, as Qona says, in the creative space, people are thinking about recruiting neurodiverse people because of their creativity. Same is true in the STEM businesses. We have STEM businesses like IBM offering neurodiverse apprenticeships specifically. IBM putting in, you know, a special sort of quiet room for their neurodiverse staff and things like that. GCHQ, when we look at them, historically, they've always recruited neurodiverse people because of their ability to problem solve, think outside the box. 25% of GCHQ staff are dyslexic. So this is just showing you, and we know places like Google have recruited lots of autistic people, and that's why we have that in the Silicon Valley now, a lot of autistic people, because they are the sort of, they bring so much to this type of industry. However, I'm concerned with the problem that we have. If we compare the Royal College of Art with Imperial College, in the next slide we see that the percentage of students, and this is just looking at dyslexia, in terms of the Royal College of Art, Qona can correct me, but these are students that are dyslexic, 29% of their staff, pretty much like GCHQ. I don't think the activities going on in two places are that similar, but anyway. And then Imperial College, this figure of less than 8% is for all disabilities, not even all SPLDs, all disabilities. And when it gets really depressing is when we look at the next data that has recently come out from the Royal Society, where they have looked specifically at the data for STEM. Can we have the next slide? Academics. And what they have shown there is that for when we're looking at academics, that the percentage, so if we imagine, are we having a problem with slides maybe? Okay, oh, that's weird. If we imagine the percentage of people with dyslexia, it's estimated 10 to 15%. Dyspraxia. If we look at all SPLDs, so that's specific learning differences, at least 20% of the population have an SPLD. So, 1 in 5 of us. Look at academics in STEM universities in the UK. Only 0.9% have an SPLD. This is really worrying for me because, and this is why I can't find these people. Where are my neurotribe in academia? Where are they? Where have they gone? Why didn't they make it? And this, I think, is really serious. Did they not make it, or have they just not disclosed? Something to be discussed. Next slide, please. So if we're thinking, right, now, this is somebody whose talk I went to at a conference at 8 o'clock in the morning. I went to this talk. Couldn't believe I'd got there. And it was just, well, if you wanted to talk at 8 o'clock in the morning, this is the man to see. Jeff Karp from Harvard. He was at MIT. This is just a little bit of his TED talk. If you like this bit, then go and listen to the rest of it. It's so cool. And the area of work that he does is called Bioinspired materials that are inspired by nature. So again, joining the dots, thinking about what happens in nature, how can we apply this? So can we play this, please?
Anyone who researches porcupines will quickly find the graphical definition of pain. Now, I'm a scientist, and there's a subset of us that like to do self-experimentation. So I just had to put these quills into my chin to get a sense for what this feels like. And I got to tell you that despite the look on my face, I was quite surprised how minimal pain there was on insertion of these quills and the minimal force that was required to actually push these quills into my chin. There we are again, learning from nature. These quills have tiny microscopic barbs that decorate the tips that have incredible interaction with tissue. And it's amazing because these barbs are so small. They're the size of a human hair. Look how much pull-out force is required to remove these quills from tissue. We see barbed quills on the left, and on the right, barbless quills. We've just gently sanded those barbs away. Look at that. Pull-out force is important to seal wounds and keep them shut. But here's what really caught our attention. Look how much tissue damage is caused by insertion of traditional surgical staples into tissue. The hole that's created is always larger than the staple itself, and bacteria can get in. And you need to bend them. Quills can avoid all of these challenges. They go into tissue with minimal damage, and the barbs actually act like the serrated features on a serrated knife, slicing through a tomato. You can make staples with quills on either end that easily insert into tissue, making perfect holes, so no risk for bacterial infection. And you wouldn't need to bend them, so less tissue damage on the way in and less complicated devices to place them. You could also make the whole system biodegradable, so it would just degrade over time and you wouldn't need to remove it.
Great. So that's just one of his inventions. This guy has got so many patents you would not believe. I mean, he's made sort of tissue glue out of slug secretions, etc. So I'm not on that level, and I'm not a material scientist. I'm more of a cell biology, stem cell biology scientist. So look at this. This is blast-induced heterotopic ossification, just runs off the tongue. Heterotopic ossification. So what is this? Well, this is commonly caused, basically, if you happen to have your limb blown off. So if you have a limb normally amputated, you will not get this. But if your limb is blown off, standing on a landmine, for example, this is what happens. And this is what happens over the next year. You might have a nice looking scan here where you've had an amputation on your top right corner there. And then as you go down, this is what can develop, these incredible sort of roots and complex structure. This is, you know, the bone trying to form back. So we say we can never regenerate a bone, but look at this. It's trying to form. It just doesn't know where it's going. It's a bit confused. And this is a huge problem, obviously, to the people sort of in conflict zone, but also to all these people. We know landmines is a massive problem. And obviously the problem with that, when you've got that on the end of your amputation, hugely painful, can't fit a prosthetic on, it's nightmarish. And the only way to get rid of it is to go in and have more surgical procedures. Right, next slide. So we were interested in addressing this and many other blast injuries. So blast-specific pathologies that you don't see anywhere else, because this is a very non-physiological situation. This isn't like an infection. This is blast, this is crazy science. So how are we going to do this? Well, we got a team of us together and we managed to get funding unusually from the Royal British Legion to do this. So we have people from the shock physics unit, we have military clinicians, we have engineers and the biologists, and we started leading this project. And if we look at the next slide, we just give you a little inkling of types of experiments we do. And really what we ended up doing was taking bone stem cells, and we wanted to recapitulate the whole blast scenario in the lab, which obviously, has a few health and safety issues, but we used the shock physics sort of platform technologies. We used our expertise in stem cell technology and actually hydrogels and other things. And we have been investigating this process. And yes, we can recapitulate this process. So if we can recapitulate it, we can then develop therapies maybe to prevent it if we can understand how it happens. But also, if we can actually utilize that process, we've got a great way of actually inducing bone formation to repair bones. So we're really interested in that. So that's the sort of way out type of projects that get me interested and excited these days. So if we look at the next slide, on the other hand, I have that sort of creative gene in me. I love doing more sort of fun things. These are just some of the projects I've been involved in. These are outreach. The first one on the left there, I hope it's on your left, where is Gina Chanetsky, an artist that I work with. We were doing a project about altruistic donation of body parts for future healthcare options, and we were using the donation of baby teeth, because both our children were losing baby teeth at that time. And she created this beautiful palace, and then we decorated with baby teeth, and all those little crowns are where the teeth were donated from across the UK. We're thinking of starting this up again, because all this was done before social media. Then we've got the Heart and Lung Repair Shop, a science pop-up shop, and then recently we have been running these amazing workshops. I have a 2 Empower program, which is workshops specifically for students with specific learning differences, and I run them for 2 groups of students. One are students with dyslexia, dyspraxia, ADHD, and the other are with autistic students. And the last ones we've been running are cybersecurity workshops. We've run them online with the National Museum Computing and with Angel Exit Theatre doing some brilliant little films for us. And we've had to do it online because it's lockdown. But it's been brilliant because we've been able to engage with all these autistic students all across the UK, and been amazing. So, and then I just say a few words. I think I might actually stop now, but this is just, I think I'm going to stop now, and we'll have questions, because I did want to say a little, but I think we've already talked about the network and the types of activities that we do in our network. And basically we are trying to start the revolution. Basically, we are trying to design education, careers, and life for neurominorities or neurodiverse people or neurodivergent people, however you identify, because the world has been, as I see it, for most part, apart from, the sort of few things, the majority of things are designed by people that are not neurodiverse, and therefore they don't sit well with us. We need other ways of interacting with the world and being and having our careers. And now is our time. We can connect on platforms like this, and strength in numbers, I say. So and we're opening up for questions now.
There's a question from Karina, who's wondering about other neurodiverse people that are studying as well with ADHD on the autistic spectrum, and what sort of research has gone into that. So I can talk from the point of view of the RCA. We don't have as many people on the autistic spectrum. I mean, as you know, dyslexia and dyspraxia, there are a lot of sort of comorbid conditions. So a lot of our students will have a bit of be a bit dyslexic and a bit ADHD, but we tend not to have students at college who are on the spectrum, or at least if we have, they don't come forward and talk to us. But I think probably Sara can speak about that more from the point of view of science, because I think there are many more Asperger's and autistic spectrum people within that field.
Well, you say that, but in terms of academics, in theory, it's 0.1%. And yet when you look around, yes, there are definitely more people that probably are autistic but haven't got that diagnosis. In terms of students, we do have a cohort of students. We have an autistic student club, which is fantastic, and those students get involved in some of my workshops as sort of role models. So yes, you can see with autism and science, it's sort of a natural fit, sort of being able to do things in incredible detail. And certainly for me, as the sort of creative scatty one, working with people that are autistic is fantastic, because they are the sort of fine detail. So I think it's perfect. But and we have lots of historic role models, but again, not so many sort of contemporary. And this is where I'm really trying to change the conversation, change the discourse around, as we're all doing. And that's the point of Neurodiversity Celebration Week, isn't it? It's thinking about how, yes, We are different, but we're proud to be different because we bring something really valuable to any field of study. And it's no difference. I think the issue might be, well, we know the issue is in school when these students get put off of put off of doing anything academic, let alone science or whatever. So yeah. Somebody was asking about, so Simon Woodfield was asking about the sort of experience of students, as in, so one of the things I would say as well is that the data suggests that these students do as well. So it's not that when these students get into their science degrees, they are, they're fractionally might not achieve as much, fractionally below, but really they do as well. But the issue is numbers coming in initially.
Yeah, I would second that. I mean, a lot of our dyslexic students, if they access the support that's available to them, some of them do incredibly well with the dissertation. And interestingly, that can help them reframe how they think about themselves in terms of writers, potentially as writers. I don't know, Roland, if you've got anything to that.
Yeah, I felt a bit let down by the education system at a young age, and it took me an incredibly long time to get to where I am now, like after a series of failures through GCSEs, which I feel like exams definitely failed different types of learning style, or different people with different neurominorities. But in terms of the dissertation, I was given the support I needed at the RCA to write something which I felt allowed me to explore writing in a way which I don't think I was allowed to explore it before.
Yes, I think at school, I seem to remember that creative writing, storytelling is sort of acceptable up to a certain level. And then you sort of get into having to write quite serious essays and dissect texts, all of which it's quite a prescriptive, and it doesn't really allow, arguably, it doesn't really allow for much imagination to bring that in. And I think that puts an awful lot of people off. And it's really thrilling when we have students who come at the beginning of the dissertation and say, I really can't do this. I don't know, I've never been able to write. And then they end up getting a distinction and maybe go on to publish stuff. And it's just great. It's about letting them grow in confidence so that they can access that side of their creativity.
I had an interesting discussion with someone the other day about from King's College about finding alternatives to the dissertation. So on their PhD program in visual cultures, they're looking at the possibility of presenting, they're looking at the possibility of performing, and using different modes instead to assess a student's output rather than very linear. Sarah will.
Yeah, I did a piece of work at Imperial about sort of, with the Education Innovation Fund, looking at what we should be changing to make our teaching more accessible. And through that program and the curriculum review, I made a lot of changes to the masters that I'm delivering. And I was able to argue against everybody's, incredible pushback from this, but against having an exam where we tested the recall of students and got students to write essays. So we no longer have that, the end of year exam, but students get opportunity, they have to write grants, they have to do presentations. So I've sort of phrase it as multiple authentic assessments, things that actually are relevant to careers within academia or within any other industry. So I think, yeah, we need to move away, because what you're saying, Nolan, I mean, you know, I know kids that are experiencing exactly the same thing now, and this is the depressing thing, that education has not moved on, and we need to think of different ways of assessing. I mean, if in art you can assess the difference between a sculpture and somebody that does animation versus, you know, you're not going to say to the person that does animation, or you know, you're not going to say to me, oh, you know, sculpt your PhD. You'd think, well, what a ridiculous thing, you know. How is she going to do that?
I'd love to see that.
Glass injury sculpted, yeah, could do nice sculptures. But it's you know, so why? And I think we're coming back to our sort of pet hate with it, which is the sort of barrier that writing brings to us. And yes, how do we surmount that? And we had some interesting discussions at our last event around that. But yeah, moving on, and yes, how do we make use of all this great tech to sort of visualize data, present data, communicate data? And the sort of whole, for me, the whole writing and publishing is just too slow. There's
a comment from Alice, who says, since seeking help from the RCA with my dissertation, I now love writing. I used to hate it with a passion. That's great, isn't it? That's so brilliant.
Yeah, I can vouch for that. I felt like I really got the support that I needed to write a really engaging essay, or like it was engaging from my perspective, and it helped me to explore something different that was like not maybe a conventional style of writing an art essay. It was somewhere between fiction and reality, you know, like but I think it's really interesting what, you know, this discussion about exams and environments, and the way that environments are only really designed to accommodate for one type of learning style. They're not designed to accommodate for a variety of learning styles. And yeah, that's that. I think last year, and COVID has really like it certainly allowed us at the RCA to be examined in a different way. I think Tracy Waller was really responsible, pivotal in bringing her research in to the examination process, and changing the way that we can be examined at college or assessed at college, by, you know, having a blended environment, having a asynchronous environment. I can't remember all the names of the different environments, but they were all there, and it allowed us to express ourselves in ways that were natural to us, not natural to like the past, you know.
Well, I think when you're trying to design a course, it's about course design, and what you want to do is to have variety, because every I mean, let's talk about Sienna. Sienna is set up Neurodiversity Celebration Week, and I met Sienna when she was 14, and she was having a lot of problems in school, and she was really looking forward to going to the math school, which she was incredibly happy when she managed to get into the math school at King's. The problem was that as an autistic student, the math school were very progressive in their way of teaching, and it was all active, what they call active learning. And active learning means you know, she was in a class and they would have to, you know, at some point do something, like she was telling me some event where she had to, and she's has autistic but also dyspraxia and ADHD. She had to lift a chair and put it on her head and walk around the room for something. And she was just saying, what a nightmare as an autistic dyspraxic person. And there was a lot of group activity. And as an autistic person, the majority of their activities were groups. You know, she was in a group of, you know, can you imagine the sort of, you know, predominantly, you know, that school is full of a lot of boys as well, because it's math school. And, you know, it was just hideous for her, because she couldn't concentrate on learning, because she was trying to do all the sort of social interactions with, you know, teenage boys, which is difficult at the most. So I think yeah, and it was just, you know, so one thing doesn't fit for everybody, and there might be some people that love that, but other people would have hated it. And so it's sort of, you know, yes, have one session of that in the week, but, you know, do lots of other different things.
There's an interesting comment from Kate who says, how can we get the education system to change this? I think talking about exams, especially in this time of change in COVID, we could overhaul the exam system. And gosh, Kate, you know, I mean, yes, let's do it, because it's such a brilliant opportunity, this. I mean, COVID's been awful in many ways, but it has actually changed the way GCSEs and A-levels have been examined. And moving forward, hopefully, some of the sort of aspects that make this playing field a bit more level for our neurodiverse children can be adopted in future exam systems. There must be some way of using the benefits that we've seen in the future. I really hope, and I'll definitely join your campaign, Kate. So count me in, please.
Maybe it's also.
There is a campaign ongoing, and it's called rethinkingassessment.com. So
Right.
I've just put, Emma's just going to post the link. So that is one thing that is ongoing at the moment. And there is a government consultation on how to assess GCSEs and A-levels. That was for the ones this year. But I think, you know, we've got little hope with Gavin Williamson, to be honest. You know, we need somebody progressive in government, you know, as the Minister for Education or whatever, because they're just not receptive to this type of thinking, I don't think.
That would be quite interesting to know how many neurodiverse politicians there are, wouldn't it? I bet there aren't very many.
I used to work as a civil servant for the government art collection. I can vouch for the fact that there's quite a few.
Oh, right, okay.
You would get autistic people, but yeah, what's his can't remember. Can't believe I've just forgotten his name. Matt Hancock is dyslexic, isn't he?
Is he?
I think so.
I don't know that's a great exemplar of forward thinking, being a visionary, strategic.
But we were talking about exams, weren't we? And I wonder if we were able to test people earlier on that might help us design those environments that are better for them to learn in. But how, you know, what infrastructure would we need in order to create those environments?
Yes, I mean, one thing that's quite interesting at college is that, yes, a third of our students have dyslexia and or dyspraxia, but out of that third, a half of that third don't know that they are dyslexic or dyspraxic until they come to college, particularly a lot of students that come from parts of Asia and even some parts of Europe as well, where not very much is known about it. And it makes such a difference, that realization, when they get the assessment and there's an explanation and they can see on a piece of paper, oh yes, I do find that particular task difficult, but how brilliant I am in visual spatial problem solving. You know, I'm in the 95th percentile of the population for that. And helping people to understand their own strengths, I think, is so empowering. And if that could be done earlier, it'd be so brilliant, wouldn't it?
It would be brilliant, yeah. It would be really great. And I think we also, like, you know, when we're talking about international students as well, we really need to think about the environments that we're creating for people, but also, you know, after graduation as well, not just just while studying. I think there needs to be a level of thought about that too, because we don't necessarily know what environments people are going to be going into after they've graduated.
Yeah.
Which might not be as supportive of their needs.
Well, yeah. Unfortunately, that brings us to the end of this lunchtime discussion. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us today. For those watching live on YouTube, apologies if we were unable to get to your questions or read out your thoughts, but a recording of this discussion will soon appear on the Great Exhibition Road Festival YouTube channel for you to watch again or share with your friends or colleagues whenever you want. All future live events and recorded videos from the festival will be appearing on this new YouTube channel, so do follow us and you'll get a little notification when a new live event or recorded video has been posted. We have a link soon to be posted in the YouTube chat to an evaluation form where you can tell us what you thought of this event. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and we'd really appreciate your feedback. Otherwise, that's it from all of us, Roland, Sarah, and myself. Thank you to everyone who tuned in, and I hope you all have a very nice afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.